In a never-ending quest for realism, the movie industry has become a grittier, darker, ravenously fact-checked landscape. And yet, despite all the insane details many filmmakers put into each and every scene, it's still an industry run on fiction and lies. After all, sometimes the truth is just boring. Action movies in particular have a habit of stretching the truth, and even though films like Fight Club and the Bourne trilogy had more realistic fighting for the most part, Hollywood seems to think that fighting is a complex mixture of ballet and taekwondo. That's probably why they understand so little about the reality of a dust-up. I'm Bees from WhatCulture.com, and this is 10 facts about fighting that action movies always get wrong. Hi everyone, Bees here from What Culture. Just a quick reminder about our brand new channel, What Culture Combat. That is a place where you can find all things mixed martial arts, boxing and anything that comes under the combat sports umbrella. We'll be bringing you previews, analysis, predictions and much more, so make sure you join us at What Culture Combat. We think it'll be of interest to you, seeing as you are just about to watch a list about people punching others in the face. This is 10 facts about fighting that action movies always get wrong, and we'll see you over at What Culture Combat. Come and subscribe, we'll see you there. 10. Getting hit in the nose hurts a lot. Let's start with one simple truth. Getting punched in the nose hurts a whole lot. Have you ever been punched in the nose? If you answered yes, is the very memory of being socked in the face chimney currently causing your eyes to well up just a little? Because there's absolutely nothing that can send the tears streaming down someone's face faster than the pain that fists of faced impact causes. It doesn't matter how tough you are or how much you can deadlift at the gym, you just don't shrug off that kind of nose trauma easily. Unless, of course, your nose is already splattered across your face from previous punches. So, remember that final fight between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Chong Li at the end of Bloodsport? By the second hit to the face, Van Damme should have spent the rest of the fight clutching his nose with one hand and crying like a baby. 9. It's a bloody mess. Speaking of repeatedly getting hammered in the face, you ever notice how boxers tend to be pretty bloody after taking more than a couple of punches to the dome? And then, to stop the bleeding between rounds, there's a person in the corner whose sole job is to stop lacerations from pumping out the insides of their face? That happens all the time. Punches create holes in you, and that's with thick padded gloves. Add knuckles to the equation and all bets are off. Somehow though, this rarely happens in Hollywood bouts. At most, it's nicks and scratches that lead to cool scars. I can no longer grow any hair on my left eyebrow ones. Fundamentally, the results of a slug out are not cleaned up with a paper towel and a couple of band-aids. So, that fight scene in Robert Downey Jr.'s version of Sherlock Holmes that everyone was praising for his physicality and gritty realism, it's a bit weird that there's barely a drop on either man at the end. 8. Large groups don't attack one at a time. This is perhaps the most classic of all martial arts tropes. The situation looks dire, with our good guy completely surrounded by a swarm of baddies, but luckily for the good guy, everyone spent a few minutes before the fight playing rock, paper, scissors to decide the order in which they will attack. And they will do so one at a time. What a result! Problem solved. This one's been explained away by choreographers, claiming it's to stop the bad guys punching each other, but unless everyone's just windmilling in, it just doesn't really ring true. In reality, if you're unlucky enough to be in a situation where you're outnumbered by a bunch of lads looking to smash your face in, know that you're likely to be dealing with several punches at once, along with hair pulls, limb grabbing, and maybe a set of home keys. Sorry to spoil the secret, but that scene from Fists of Fury where Bruce Lee takes on an entire dojo thanks to his attackers lining up in a supermarket queue just isn't going to happen out in the real world. 7. People don't fight like gentlemen. Alright Hollywood, let's stop pretending that guys who get into fistfights on a regular basis are going to act like noblemen while they're trying to punch each other in the throat, shall we? It just doesn't go down that way. Even Hugh Grant. And look at him. he's going to fight dirty and try to bite into a guy's calf muscle if it means the difference between a 3-night stay in the hospital and going home with a black eye. Nobody is going to fight with a code of honour. Expect your testicles to be abused. Yes, both of them. Expect eyes, nose and mouth injuries. If it's a dirty technique, it's more likely to take you out. The biggest offender of this over the years is Jackie Chan. His characters always seem to have a big problem with using guns, and he almost never kills anybody, despite constantly being put in positions where he could be killed himself. Sorry Jackie, street fights are a dirty affair, and even a true gentleman gets covered in mud from time to time. 6. Street fighting styles aren't pretty. As talented as Jet Li and Jackie Chan are as true martial artists, there's no getting around the fact that they are nothing like their real-life street fighting counterparts. In real life, perhaps an eighth of the techniques used on Hong Kong or Hollywood movie sets would actually be effective, and that is being generous. High kicks are for people who want to receive catastrophic damage to their unguarded genitals. Spin moves are best used in breakdancing. Backflips are a good way to get the most expensive room in the hospital. Fighting gets sloppy, so best get your homework done. Study the fight scenes of the Raid. Take note of every move they do, and then promptly disregard all of it, because there's a 99% chance you'll get your head taken off if you ever try any of it in a legitimate fight. 5. There's no time for witty one-liners. There will be times for piercing Oscar Wilde style wit, but ultimately, when you are about to enter a fight with someone who wants to make your face resemble mashed potato, it's probably not the most practical thing coming up with something really clever and badass to say. And yet everyone, from Schwarzenegger and Stallone to Chuck Norris and Steven Seagal, always seem to find a way to squeeze them in. Even if you've had time to prepare and you've got some choice lines ready, they're unlikely to come out the way you intended them to. First of all, there's simply not enough time between shoving, grappling and haymaker dodging to catch your breath and deliver a wry soliloquy. And secondly, adrenaline may bolster a lot of your physical attributes, but sadly, it does not turn you into a screenwriter for Die Hard. So, unless you've spent some quality time rehearsing those zingers that you jotted down in your notebook, you should just leave the John McClane stuff to the professionals. 4. A stand-up fight doesn't last long. The beginning of a fight is a lot like the beginning of sex. Please wait, we're not done yet. It might be initiated while standing up, but within a few seconds it becomes clear that out of necessity, things are going to the ground. And just as Hollywood loves to repeatedly make the claim for sex scenes involving penis weightlifting strength, films also love to miss out the floor fighting reality. Even a movie like Oldboy, so dedicated to making a fight seem realistic that they refuse to have the actors pull their punches, has the protagonist fighting from the ground for about 1/10 of the famous corridor scene. All it takes is one missed punch or ill-timed kick and someone is going to be taken down into an arm lock or have their legs swept out from underneath them. Even before the whole world became obsessed with MMA, a couple of amateurs weren't going to simply trade blows and box it out for 10 minutes. Even experienced fighters, especially them really, will spend more time on their back than someone the lawyers advised we didn't mention, and that's actually a good idea because... 3. Real fights are so tiring. Have you ever spent a couple of minutes on a punching bag giving it everything you've got? It's not easy, and that's without the punching bag trying to fight you back. There's also that whole adrenaline thing. Sure, it may boost you into action initially, helping you put more power and speed into your punches and kicks, but eventually that adrenaline wears off, and quickly. And once you take into account all of the trash talking, pre-fighting, what did you just call my mum that likely occurred, you might be drained after 30 seconds of scuffling. But you wouldn't know that from watching a Jet Li fight scene. Oh no, apparently Li could spend several hours fighting and come out the other end fresh as a daisy. Long story short, fights are sprints, not marathons. 2. Being knocked out can be life-threatening. This one is most common in movies that have more of an action thriller vibe to them, where it's pretty typical for the hero to get knocked unconscious from behind, only to wake up a couple of hours later tied to a chair. He's confused and a little groggy, but otherwise is still in prime fighting shape. Except that being unconscious for the amount of time it would take for the hero to be dragged back to the villain's basement is pretty much a recipe for permanent brain damage. In fact, if someone is knocked out for more than a couple of minutes, there's a good chance their brain won't ever fully recuperate from the incident. Now, compound that time by about 100, which is almost always the amount of time our brave hero spends in the dark, and not only will he not be able to think clearly enough to untie himself and beat the bad guy to a pulp, but it's pretty much a guarantee that he won't be able to differentiate the villain's face from a bowl of pea soup for the rest of his life. So, rather than Bruce Willis and Ving Rhames characters from Pulp Fiction waking up in a basement staring horrified at a gimp, they'd be waking up no longer knowing what feet are or how to use their tongues. Shame for the gimp, really. 1. The best way to win a fight is by walking away from it. Sound cheesy? Maybe it is, but don't tell that to Bruce Lee. His theory of fighting without fighting is a time-honoured tradition that prefers verbal and intellectual beatdowns to the physical variety. This is shown in a scene from Enter the Dragon, where Bruce is bullied into a fight by a douchebag with a scar on his face, only to beat him without laying a finger on him, instead talking the man into stranding himself on a lifeboat. Pacifism, as some might call it, isn't just for Gandhi. Even though it might actually take more effort than punching a guy in the throat, the end result is a lot better for everyone. Action movies would rather you think that defending your honour is a dish best served by kicking your way through someone who slighted you in some way, but seriously, there are easier ways to diffuse the situation. Yet, with the exception of Lee, not many protagonists in Hollywood have caught on to the fact that sometimes all it takes is your words to defeat the enemy, because despite what the Transporter may have taught us, nobody ever really wins in a real fight.